Good morning from WKYT News. I'm Bill Bryant. We welcome you to Kentucky Newsmakers, and our main guest today is the governor of the Commonwealth of Kentucky, Matt Bevin. These are interesting times in Kentucky. After weeks of haggling, the state legislature did pass a budget. It infuses a lot of money into troubled state pension funds. Governor Bevin is going over that $21 billion two-year spending plan line by line. He has restored $23 million in funding to the state's public colleges and universities after meeting with the presidents of those institutions. The governor's ability to make cuts in the current budget is being challenged right now legally by the state attorney general. The governor has also set aside $18 million until a judge decides that case. It was a busy legislative session with several high-profile pieces of legislation passing. That includes felony expungement, also a longer look-back period for DUI convictions. Earlier this week, Governor Bevin leveled some tough accusations at the previous administration headed by former Governor Steve Beshear. He alleged corruption at high levels and has started an investigation. Republicans gathered this weekend in Lexington for their state convention as they prepare for the national convention in Cleveland this summer. The Derby season is also upon us. The governor will soon be the one giving the trophy out to the winner of that, and puts Kentucky really in the national spotlight. We welcome Governor Matt Bevin. Thank you for being here.
Great to be here. As you noted, nothing going on at all. Very quiet, quiet here in the Commonwealth.
Exactly. The question is where to start, you know, with all of that. But let's begin with, in this whirlwind, with obviously the most impactful thing to the people, and that is that a state budget is passed. It invests a considerable sum into the troubled retirement funds. To get there, you made some cuts in other areas after a lot of negotiations. Finally, there is a budget. Do you like the final product?
Yeah, I'm not done with it yet. And as you noted, I am going through it line by line, and that's my responsibility, and that is what is expected of me in my position. At the same time, I am truly grateful that our legislators did what they were sent to do, and I applaud them for that. The House and the Senate came together in a bipartisan manner and did the job, but that is the job. That is why they were elected. That is why they were sent there. And I will just say this. It frustrates me, both now as governor and long before I was ever governor, to see how often we push to the final hour or hours the very key decisions that we had days and weeks and months to accomplish. And that needs to end, and I hope in future legislative sessions we'll get to the big things first. That said, the work was done. It is a good budget. It is a far more conservative budget than anybody, no matter what is done in the final version, than anyone thought would be possible, and I am grateful for that fact.
Some have said one of the catalysts in getting it done may have been the fact that you said no special session if they don't. Did you, you know, a couple of days before the General Assembly had to end under the Constitution, did you fear there might not be a deal?
I did not fear it, but I know there were some who would like the idea of coming back. It's something we've historically done a lot of in this state, where you go home and then you come back and get paid for a special session to do what you, in this case, had 60 days to get done before. And I'm not playing that game with the taxpayers' money. And I was not kidding, and I think people understood that. I do appreciate the fact that people are taking what I say as serious, because I am serious. This isn't a game to me, Bill. I'm not there to play around. I'm not there to win political points. I'm there to get a job done, to clean up our financial mess, to get our house in order. And when I say something, I do mean it, and I'm glad people took me seriously.
You have made the case that the retirement funds have been neglected and have not gotten the attention that they have needed over the years. House Speaker Greg Stumbo and the Senate President Robert Stivers both call for more transparency in how that money is being invested. You, in fact, have ordered the removal of the chair of the KTRS, although that is another thing that's being challenged at this point. You're calling for a fresh start with that. Is transparency important? Transparency is critical, especially when you're managing tens of billions of dollars of taxpayers' money and of retirees' money. And the idea that it's being challenged in court, of course it is. That's what liberals do. When they don't get their way, they run to the courts hoping they'll find a kindred spirit and a sympathetic ear. But we are absolutely in the right. It's interesting, the previous governor used the exact same methodology in the first 4 months in which he served to remove 11 people. 11. I've removed 2
this way, and you would think that the end of the earth was coming. I get sued every time I do it, or a threat of a suit by his son and other people. It's silliness. But they run to the court. The bottom line is I have the authority and the responsibility to clean up the mess. We need transparency, to your point. Absolutely. And interestingly, I'm not convinced that our former board chair at KRS, who I just removed, and the current head of KRS, executive director, I'm not convinced that these are individuals who are actually very committed to that transparency. The idea that you are not allowed to look under the hood to know what we're paying to whom, to know what kind of finder's fees were used, that's an outrage. That is not the way it is in other states, and the taxpayers have every right to know how their dollars are being spent and who is benefiting from it, which gets back to the comment you alluded to earlier about the press conference I called. These sweetheart deals where inside people are getting their wheels greased at the taxpayer's expense, those days are over. They're over.
What are your findings in that regard?
That is just beginning. Let me just say this. We were not specific for a reason, but there is a myriad of things that will be inspected, including those that we talked about, and a whole lot that we didn't, that are frankly going to be much more sensitive and that are going to involve more people. It's unfortunate because it's an embarrassment to Kentucky. The way in which this state has been run historically and in recent years, like it's a banana republic of some sort, is an insult to taxpayers. It really is. I was elected to clean this up, and clean it up is what I'm going to do. And we are not going to have inside deals, and we're not going to play political games. We will get to the bottom of it. I did just appoint an inspector general. He's a former U.S. Marshal, a man with an incredible amount of experience. We will hire outside counsel, and we will get to the bottom of this.
You're at this point, has your team uncovered things that would signal that this is going in a deeper direction, or do you just anticipate that you will have these people take a good look at things and report back to you?
It'll be both, sadly. I mean, it is clear that it is systemic. It was deep. It involved people at the highest levels. It involved millions of dollars of people serving themselves at the taxpayer expense. This is not acceptable, should not be acceptable. It will be brought to light, and we'll let the people of Kentucky decide for themselves what they think of it.
I'm sure it is no surprise to you that there was pushback from the former governor, who called it in a release a pathetic spectacle.
Mm-hmm. It sounds similar to the type of thing that O.J. Simpson said things like that. Scott Peterson said things like that. That's what guilty people always say. People who are trying to cover their tracks, people who were very deeply involved in the kind of mess, are the first to try to cast aspersions on anyone bringing the truth to light. But the truth will come to light, and the truth will set us free.
Do you have a time frame in mind or a goal in mind as to this process?
No, it will be thorough. It will be thoughtful. There's no set time frame because it's not tied to anything other than discovering what actually has gone on. The people of Kentucky deserve good government. This is what they want. It doesn't matter the party that it comes from. They expect the people they elect to go to Frankfort and govern on their behalf. That's what I am doing. That's what I'm attempting to do. And if you look at the things that went forward and you look at this budget that we put forward, far more Democrats benefit from some of the decisions that I've made than Republicans do. There were far more shoring up of retirement systems which benefit more Democrats than Republicans, and no tax cuts which would be more favored by Republicans perhaps than Democrats. But the reason is because that is where we are, and that is what good government demands. I'm not there to play favorites. I'm there to govern effectively, and that is what I intend to do.
A former personnel cabinet secretary pleaded guilty to taking $200,000 in bribes. Do you suspect there are other things of that nature, or do you think that there are lesser but nonetheless serious concerns?
The FBI at the federal level is investigating those issues. That is in federal court that he pled guilty. But as they have made clear, they are continuing to investigate. There will be many more shoes to drop, unfortunately. I'm afraid both at the federal level and at the state level. Why I have taken on what I have done is because at the state level there are things that need to be addressed and looked into that the federal's investigation is not focused on. They will probably transect at some point, but whether they do or don't is irrelevant. I'm focused on the state level issues.
The Attorney General, who is the former governor's son, says that the sitting governor cannot cut allocations made by the legislature unless there is a declared budget shortfall. You softened your cuts to higher education. The current cut will be 2% in this fiscal year. But you've set aside money in case the court rules against you. Do you anticipate winning that suit?
Yes. I mean, the Attorney General's wrong, straight up wrong. And there's absolute precedent, both historically, politically, and most critically, legally, for me to do exactly what I've done. I have every authority to do it. The only reason there has been any change to it is because of that meeting I had with university presidents, where I had every single university president, and the leaders in the Senate and the leaders in the House, and we all sat down in one room for 2.5 hours, and we worked it out. And that's what governance is. I'm not here to play games with people. I'm not. I've said it several times. It's true. When you want to get something done, sit down, look a person in the eye, and come up with a solution. We came up with one which university presidents were comfortable with. Nobody likes a tax cut, or a cut to funding. Everyone likes a tax cut probably, but nobody likes a funding cut, and I understand that, but these are tight times, and so it's important for us to get this done. They agreed, and I appreciate our university presidents understanding they need to be a part of the solution.
I don't expect you to get specific about those discussions, but what is it that convinced you to soften those cuts, both in the two-year budget plan as well as the immediate cut?
Just simply because I wanted to get this accomplished. I wanted to get a budget through. And if you have an impasse, and that was an impasse, where I'm calling for 9% and others are calling for 0%, to me, the logical solution is to go at 4.5%. I mean, that's what you compromise. You meet in the middle. Is that less than I wanted? Absolutely. Is it more than others wanted? I would assume so. And yet we got the job done. You
say you want the universities and the colleges to move to performance-based funding at some point. How fleshed out is that at this point? Is there a plan in place that everybody understands going forward?
No, there's not. But here's what's interesting. There was a 15-month study done by the Council on Post-Secondary Education in this state, by the university presidents who are members of that council. And so this group came together and came up with a proposal for outcomes-based funding. It took them 15 months. They published it last October. It had some decent things in it, but it itself was not completely fully codified or explained. What I have made clear, and I've asked a certain university president, who I won't mention, to shepherd this project, to take 3 or 4 or 5 of his colleagues and to come up with a working group where we will come up with something that is very clear. It's why we don't call for it to take place until the second year of the biennium. Because to ask for it to take place before we've developed it makes no sense whatsoever. We will have outcomes-based funding. I want to be clear on that. We will have outcomes-based funding, but the metrics will be defined by those very same people who are being measured.
Governor, when you say outcome-based funding, are you talking about graduation rates, success in job placement? What kinds of things will...
Those are the kind of things we're going to look at. Most critically, we do need to look at things like graduation rates, things like progress toward graduation, things like the types of degrees that people have, the employability of graduates. These are the types of things, among others, that we will look at, the types of programs that we are investing in. These things are important. It will be a portion of the monies, the vast majority of the monies in the immediate years for our higher education institutions will continue to come the way it always has. But there will be an element that will be variable where they will compete, in essence, against themselves for the full allotment.
You are committed as governor to publicly assisted higher education.
Absolutely. No question about it. And as an individual who had to rely on, financial aid and scholarships and things of that sort, I also understand how important it is to ensure that it is affordable and that people have access to it. I'm very blessed to have been able to have a higher education, to go to college. But it didn't come about as a result of anything other than hard work and people coming alongside and making opportunity available to me. I want and expect the same thing for others. I am absolutely committed, and I've said to these university presidents, I look forward to the day when we are adding monies and not taking them away. And this will come when we get our financial house in order. more than about $2 billion, actually, of the pension obligation that this state has, $2 billion in unfunded liability, actually is for university employees. So they have a very vested interest as well, ensuring that we take care of this problem.
I mean, many do point out that surrounding states have increased their funding to higher education. Your case is that Kentucky has not been in position to do that.
We're not. We have the worst funded pension system in the United States. We have the third worst credit rating of any state in America. We have the 47th lowest level of workforce participation. So only 3 states have fewer working people than us who are able-bodied and working age. These are big problems. We don't have the financial luxury that some of the other states have because we've been run by people in recent years who've been playing inside games and greasing each other's wheels and not paying attention to putting our best foot forward. We need legal reform. We need tort reform specifically. We need school choice. We need labor law changes. We need tax structure changes. We need to bring change to Kentucky that will allow us to compete with Indiana, Tennessee, and others.
You said school choice. You have some appointments to the State Board of Education coming up, and as well as the Professional Standards Board and so forth. Will you be keeping your agenda in mind as you make those appointments?
Absolutely. No, I mean, again, why would I not? Why would I not? I was elected being very specific about what my vision for Kentucky was. And I have every intention of following through on putting proof behind that by electing people who will follow that vision as well.
Governor Matt Bevin is our guest. Our remaining moments with him here on WKYT's Kentucky Newsmakers and why he was in town on the weekend. Coming up. Welcome back into WKYT's Kentucky Newsmakers. We continue our discussion with Kentucky Governor Matt Bevin, and we'll talk about the Derby here before we go and so forth. But Governor, are you concerned that, as you are facing these lawsuits to examine your ability to make decisions, as you indicate that this full investigation is going on, that your tenure be 4 years of, fighting the previous administration and so forth?
I have no beef with the previous administration at all. I have a beef with things that are done at the expense of the taxpayers that are inappropriate. If that happens to have been done by the previous administration, that's the problem I have. It's not with people individually. The reality is I'm insulted by people who insult Kentucky. I'm insulted by people who treat us like fools, who take advantage of us and then expect it to be swept under the rug. Those days are over. For the next 4 years, I'm for transparency, for bringing to light what has happened, and to ensure that we are clear about the fact that it's not going to happen going forward. With respect to these lawsuits, they're frivolous. Sadly, we have an attorney general who literally has nothing else to do. He has very little constitutional authority. He really doesn't. And if you notice, most of the times what he gives are opinions. They're not binding on anything. They're not legally enforceable for anything. He can go to court, and that's what he does, and that's what others are apparently going to do a lot of. We're going to beat them at every turn. I don't enter into things. I don't make decisions that we haven't done our homework on in advance. Mark my words, as surely as we sit here, these court cases are going to come down on our side because we have the law on our side. And at a certain point, it will start to look like so much silliness on the part of our Attorney General. He needs to get about his job and stop trying to undermine the state of Kentucky.
If you do not get a favorable ruling at the circuit court level, would you anticipate appeals?
Of course. I mean, and again, because there is a randomness, sadly, to the legal system. And that's why, and some of these things may go all the way to the Kentucky Supreme Court. That's the reality. They may really go that far. And that's the recourse that people have. I don't have a problem with that. If people want to sue me, they can sue me. I lose not one lick of sleep over any of these because they're so silly.
You're in town for the Republican State Convention that was going on Saturdays. We taped this on an unusual day. What's going on there? You're selecting the delegates to the National Convention. Senator Mitch McConnell seems to indicate he would like a second ballot at that convention. Do your delegates go unpledged after the first round?
Well, the way it works in Kentucky by law is that delegates will go to the convention, and there are 46 delegates, and then there are alternates as well if something were to happen. So you have 46 delegates that we will have at the National Convention. They will be pledged according to the vote of the people of Kentucky in the Republican primary, and that has already occurred. We know how that will occur. The only potential question is for those delegates that were assigned to somebody who is no longer in the race? What happens to those in the first voting? That's the only potential for any kind of question as to what will happen. But the vast majority of delegates went to the two individuals who are leading the pack on the Republican side. Ted Cruz, Donald Trump, these two individuals are individuals who have a legitimate shot of winning the nomination. It is increasingly likely that neither one of them has any chance of getting 1,237, which I think is the magical number. So if they don't, there will be a first vote. People will vote based on the numbers. No one will get the magic number, and then it's an open convention is what it's called.
Free for all?
It has the potential to be so, but what you will see then is more of the then current will of the people, and I think we will come out with the right nominee, whoever that happens to be.
The Derby season is here. You'll be hoisting the trophy to the winner. How important is the Derby as an opportunity to showcase Kentucky for the nation and the world?
It's fantastic. It's interesting. I've met with 3 owners in recent days who have horses that are running, and each has personally asked that I present it to them. I've told them I can't predict that. I told them guaranteed that one of the two of us would be on the inside of the infield. It is a great moment. It's more than just 2 minutes. It is 2 weeks, really, of the world's attention on us, and an opportunity for the Commonwealth to shine, and I'm honored to be a small part of it.
You enjoying this job?
I don't know. I'm grateful for the job. Somebody asked me if I was having fun. I'm not having fun.
You take the selfies and do the social media, and it appears so to people.
But it's rewarding. And here's the thing. I try to find moments where we can make it real to people. People are grateful for the fact that we've made it accessible. When I walk through a kitchen, for example, on my way to speak in front of 1,400 people who paid for it, I stop and talk and thank the people who are actually working behind the scenes. That's who I am. That's how I was raised. That part I enjoy.
Governor Bevin, thanks for coming.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it very much. We'll be back in a moment and hear from WKYT Chief Meteorologist Chris Bailey about spring weather. It's been a strange one this year. Back in a moment.